Hi, this is Jamie Mason Cohen, and this is Signature Leadership, where we help world-class leaders uncover their authentic selves. And in the process, we discover our own authentic selves. Now, this particular episode is personal. This episode features Howard Cohen. That's right, my father. Now, I asked my dad, who I'll be referring to as my dad throughout because that would be more authentic than Howard. But for the opening, Howard Cohen is a gambling expert. My dad has spent over 40 years as one of the leading gambling experts in the country, in Canada. It started where he found himself to be a gambling addict, and he'll expand on that. And from there, he went into Gamblers Anonymous, where he has led the organization on multiple fronts for over 4 decades. Now, on top of that, he also has been involved in helping initiate several organizations within the country, including the Gambling Council. He's a certified counselor in addiction, and he's now a retired criminal lawyer where he defended everyone from NHL players to people associated with organized crime. He lived a fascinating life professionally, and of course, I know him as my father. So we're going to dive into what is gambling addiction? Is it an issue in the workplace today? What are some of the myths of gambling addiction? And how can you identify if someone is a gambling addict both at work and at home? And it might even be you. Dad, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
I'd like to jump right in and ask you, what does it mean to be a gambling addict?
A gambling addict is no different than an alcoholic, a drug user gone awry. With regard to gambling, it's the sensation and the urge to gamble without thought of the consequences. You live a lie, but you're not going to ever go into it. You live a lie of denial. In 12-step programs, there's a joke that denial is just a river in Egypt. It doesn't apply to an addict. You have no regard for anything around you, your family, your job, your health. You're taken over. And studies recently have shown that our addict brains are different than people who are non-addicts. So you lead a life of what Thoreau, the poet, said of desperation.
Quiet desperation.
Because gambling is your love, it's your everything. You don't have any solid ground. You go day to day, bet to bet, at the detriment of everything around you that you believe you love and want. A life of quiet desperation.
Quiet desperation. And on that note, one of the components of your expertise in this area that I admire, really separate from being my dad, is you walk your talk. You've experienced the lowest lows. You have pulled yourself up, and now you've devoted much of your life to helping others who have gone through similar, if not exactly the same things that you went through. I know you've talked in the media about this. I really want to dive into, even on a deeper level, your story, because I think we'll talk about the facts. We'll talk about how to help others. For me, your credibility begins with what happened to you and helping people understand some context. So simply, can you tell us your story of gambling addiction?
Well, it's interesting. I was born into a family that could give me everything. So, unlike a lot of people I've met, it wasn't started as a get rich scheme. I had everything, but my brain, I seem to have wanted it more. So I started gambling for alleys at public school. my father, who was a social gambler, wonderful man, he didn't play as much golf as he should have. He started gambling, but never more than he could afford. But in those days, when you're 10, 11, 12, I used to help him bet sports. So it was a nice bonding activity, I thought, or whatever you think of when you're 12 years old. But then it became not a bad habit or a vice with me. It became an addiction in my teenage years. And yet I people around me would say I was different. I was a little bit crazy, but I had everything. I was good in school, good in university. I went to law school, and I was gambling over my head. So I had slowly. It was very slow build up with me, but I was in denial because I used to say to somebody, "Well, I win money on football when I bet," and they say, "Yeah, that's true." What I didn't tell them is I lose triple the amount when I bet on hockey. But you don't rationalize as a addict. You do anything that will please you so you can move on. And if you happen to lose, you always said to yourself, well, next day, tomorrow, the next bet, I'll get everything back. By the way, that makes us different from alcoholic. An alcoholic won't drink a bottle of rye thinking that he'll have to go tomorrow, he'll be able to stop. Gamblers are always into the next day because it's a money disease. And with money and the big hope, it's a sham, by the way, but the big hope is tomorrow I'll get even. And interesting thing, there were tomorrows where I got even, but that's borrowed money because the day after tomorrow, I'd lose it again and more. So there's no end to this insidious illness. And I gambled and gambled and gambled till certain events, one of which I'm not going to repeat here, it's too harmful, led me to believe I had reached some kind of bottom, that what I was doing with my life wasn't a bad habit, wasn't a vice, it was an illness, which has subsequently been recognized by the medical community that it's the highest form of mental addiction known to man. So if anybody's record keeping, that puts us number one of all addictions.
Can you tell a story that you're comfortable sharing about when you reached a moment in your life where you thought, I've really got to find a way to make it change?
Well, I have two wonderful children, both a credit to society. I had three children, and my wife and I lost one of them. It came after 24 hours sitting in emergency room at Sick Children's Hospital, and meningitis or whatever took this child from us. And my first call was not to my parents or my best friend or a relative. It was to my bookmaker because I had an appointment with him that I wasn't going to be able to keep. And it was at that moment I said to myself, I'm really sick. I'm an animal. And everybody tells me I'm a good guy. And I said, well, I may be a good guy, but I got an awful illness. And that made me know that that wasn't me talking. That was my illness talking. And I decided at that point, if I can't get fixed myself, I'm going to make the world understand that people like me are out there and need help. And based on that, some years later, I founded the Canadian Foundation on Compulsive Gambling with a partner, Tibor Barsoni, who's now left this world. And today that's called the Responsible Gambling Council. And you may have heard it, but the other day there was a ruling by the government that on all this gambling advertising that's going on, they'll have to cease and desist. And that was a lot of the work of the Responsible Gambling Council getting to the government to make them stop these celebrities from advertising.
And what's the problem with, in your estimation, these celebrities like Austin Matthews or Rafael Nadal in tennis or MMA fighters? being the faces of gambling on TV?
Well, a 12-year-old or 11-year-old in any of those, tennis, soccer, hockey. If you live in Canada, hockey is everything. These people that are advertising are heroes to them. So what would not stop 11, 12-year-old, 15-year-old saying, oh, my heroes love gambling, so why shouldn't I do it? It's a very simple, sad, sick way of bringing a message, something that can lead into destruction. And people will throw statistics. Well, it's only 3% of the population. That's bogus. That's a 20-year-old study. Studies today say that if you reach youth being defined as 11 years old and over, they will go up to a possibility of 28% of addiction. That's scary. That's a tsunami of what's happening here. This is what alcoholism was in the 50s. Gambling is now. And it's too easy. You can ruin your life on your phone in 1-2 days. This has the epidemic isn't trying to be dramatic. This is an epidemic. And if we're talking 25, 1 out of 4, a recent study said 48% in Canada had made a bet last year. That study used to be 10%. So we can't be blinded by this anymore. It's here. It'll track into every phase of our society. This is a addiction with regard to business. They have warnings about alcohol to their employers. They have warnings about drug use. Nary a word about gambling. And I think it's time to smell the roses for the business community.
Yeah. Well, on that note, you sent me a link to an article. You're constantly sending me updated information in this area when we're emailing back and forth. And it's from, I believe it's called Kindbridge Behavioral Health. And this particular study echoes what you just said, which just came out, which is there's several statistics here, but one in particular that stood out to me, which is 72% of respondents think that organizations should be concerned about gambling, with the biggest concern expressed by those who work in financial services. Another statistic said 10% of working adults have direct experience of the problems gambling can cause in the workplace. Now, those were British statistics, yet you just quoted Canadian statistics. Can we talk a little more about the potential hazards and dangers of gambling in the workplace and how problem gambling in particular could affect executives, leaders, managers, or teams?
Well, you have to start with the premise. Compulsive gambling is a silent killer. If you took 100 people at a movie theater and you walked around and somebody says, identify who might be alcoholic here. Well, you'll smell their breath. You'll see perhaps red skin color, erratic behavior. Then the same person asks you, identify, if you can, drug addicts. And the same thing, behavior uncontrolled, talking out of not necessary. Then the same person asks you, identify, if you can, a compulsive gambler. Nothing. They're sitting there watching a movie. It's a hidden disease, and therefore much harder to recognize anywhere, including a work setting. So what do you have to do if somebody is watching this podcast and said, I see them on their phones all the time, but I didn't know that they might be a gambler. Well, those who you might suspect or not suspect, maybe the whole company, recheck their productivity in the last few months. Recheck how absent they were compared to where they were 2 years ago. Recheck their expense accounts. Are they much higher than they used to be? And if they average 200 a month, why are they at 400 a month? This is the best you can do right now. But as we get more expertise on this stuff, it'll show us certain ways of which we can even do better at this, but it's a start. It's a start. And just on the basis, if we're at a 28% possibility, rest assured that these aren't coming from those who don't do as well as others. Ontario reported $6 billion yesterday in the new gaming companies that are advertising in Ontario. 6 billion with a B. Where does that money come from? I don't think somebody working part-time at a coffee shop can come up with that amount of money. So this is real, folks. Because you don't know a compulsive gambler, because you run a company where you don't think anything happened, this is going to happen. Because I remember years ago, the government said when they introduced in Ontario Proline, which a lot of people play, a lot recreationally, but addicts I sit with in rooms every week that started their whole journey to addiction on Proline. And the government was proud because they limited it to $100 a variety store. And you should talk to people that I talked to who went to 20 variety stores in 2 hours or on every block and bet $100 each. They couldn't afford $50, period. But they saw this as this is their way out with a big score.
How would you recognize or identify if you are an executive or a leader, whether you have 5 people in an organization or 100, even though that's a different dynamic, the behavioral signs? You mentioned some of the specific ways in terms of the bank account. Can we expand on that a little more? Can you tell me a little more about your experiences in working with executives? What were some of the signs that other people might have missed that with your rare level of expertise, you pinpointed that this person has a problem with gambling?
Well, I'm often invited to a seminar along with other experts in other fields. And I've been going to Gamblers Anonymous now for 45 years. And the first thing when a new person walks in who's either denial or doesn't know, or something's not feeling right, or the wife or the parents have asked them to go, or her, there's something called the 20 questions. And it's purely yes or no answers. Do you lose work due or school due to gambling? Has gambling ever caused you unhappiness in your family? And we don't have time to go over the 20 questions, but it's been used for 50 years. And very few words have changed. And when Harvard Medical School came up with this, they said if you answered at least 7 of these questions, never mind 18, 7, you may or could very well become a compulsive gambler and addict. And nothing's changed. 45 years ago, I walked in and I answered 18 of that 20. And often new people come in who don't think they really have a problem because they haven't lost their house yet or their family, will answer 20. Now, certainly way over 7. I've never been in a room where somebody got 5, even when they're in denial.
One of the parts of your work that makes me really proud is what we might refer to as being a gambling interventionist. So there was a TV show years ago where they had drug interventionists. People were addicted to drugs and their family reached out to an expert who helped that individual by coming into their home or their workplace, literally surrounding them to help them because they were in a desperate place. You do that with gambling. Can you give us an example of one of the stories, one of the case studies, without obviously mentioning the person's name, where you helped someone who was at that desperate place?
Well, first of all, it's always a secret. Even when families suspect a lot, and even if the families know, it's still a secret as to the degree. And I walk in, the first thing I say first of all, I'm the only interventionist, gambling interventionist in Canada, and I have no idea why there is not more. However, when I'm in one of these interventions, and people will call me or email me, and they go from Vancouver to Calgary to Toronto. There's no geographic area that isn't affected by it, since we can, as I said before, go online anywhere and do it. But there's not necessarily by saying you're only as sick as your secrets. You're only as sick as your secrets. If we can get some honesty in that room, that person who was so scared that everybody will leave them and walk away from them, it's the opposite. People want to love you. People want to see somebody sick getting better, not somebody sick staying sick. With that, it's not a whole lot different than what you watch on TV. You bring together people that love the individual, or could be an employer, could be a priest or rabbi or whatever, and you have them look directly in a truthful, not condescending way, and tell the addict what they think, what they see now, what they would love to see, the old person before they became an addict, and how they can help, and make the addict realize for the first time the running has to be over. And there's boundaries. Look at, these aren't 100% good news stories. If 20% are successful, I've done my job. Hopefully more than that, but I'm a realist. But it also sets up, listen, you have to do something, because we have our boundaries too. And then it becomes a choice for the addict. And this is a choice they never had before, because they were in the midst of a horrific disease. So for that hour, or that 2 hours, or sometimes 12 hours, clarity has to get into the addict that he has a choice to change, get treatment, go to GA, Gamblers Anonymous, and live a better way of life, or stay what he's doing and move in the real world of desperation, boundless, countless desperation. But at least everybody's tried and given the addict a chance. And you hope to God that he seizes on that.
What are some of the myths?
Oh, I didn't answer an example. Well, a recent one was that the family thought, and this person was the CEO, that the losses could have been 100,000. They turned out to be more in line of $5 million. So in effect, the company, the multi-million-dollar company, was bankrupt. It's still going today, 6 months later, a payment plan. The banks don't like to put a thriving business, they don't like ending it. So they worked out financial arrangements over years. And this person who caused it obviously removed themselves as the CEO and is making a livable salary, and the rest is being paid off. So the money never surprises me. And that's the intervention business there does well in bringing that to light.
Okay. And at the end of this, I'm going to give you some details about how you can get in touch with Howard, my dad, if you suspect that there's someone who you work with, who works for you, or a family member might have a gambling problem that you're concerned about, so that my dad can help guide you. Dad, what are some of the myths about gambling that you've heard over and over that we can steer correct in this time together?
Oh, everybody gambles. It's harmless. It's a nice recreational pursuit. And you know, some of it's true. When I say from studies that say from 3 to whatever 20-something%, 3% in some areas, some cities is the right number. So 97% can do this socially and afford to do it socially. I'm worried about the 5%, the kids growing up, the potential harm that it will cause because the openness of gambling. Gambling excessively is a sickness, not a bad vice, not a bad habit. total myth. Socially, it's fine. If you can go away for a few hours at the casino and come home and you can afford it, by all means go. You help the economy. But if you got a problem, don't say, I don't gamble every day and don't go to sleep with it. And that could happen to you one day. And I've seen it.
What are some examples of well-known people in business, in sports, who come to mind for you, who exhibited compulsive gambling or gambling problems?
Well, the world record holder is Bernie Madoff. And he actually educates here by knowing his story. The myth that gambling is a betting on a game or going to a casino. The fact is that in some circumstance, your life is a gamble. Madoff was the pioneer in trading. Anybody who was everybody, including Warren Buffett and people like that, would go to Bernie Madoff for advice. And yet he made billions for people, but for himself, he wasn't that good because he wasn't structured like he would be for his clients. So left on his own devices, he invented a system from Peter to pay Paul, a Ponzi scheme, as they called it, and caused grief, obviously, to his family. One of his sons, who wasn't involved but had mental issues, jumped off a tower, killed himself, even though the FBI said he had nothing to do with it. His other son, developmental problems, still alive. The only part of this that brings me a little bit of happiness is the person in charge of getting this money back to people, including Elie Wiesel and these with his Holocaust foundations, which lost millions because they thought they will invest, got a lot of their money back because Madoff had a lot of money, a lot of assets. And the particular guy in New York was sensational at recovering money out of the Madoff estate. He sits for 40 years in jail today, having no contact with any of his family. But Madoff celebrities, oh my God, there are probably 10 celebrities, I won't name them all, who work for free in Las Vegas for the money they owe the casino. If you go Google just compulsive gamblings and celebrities, you'll see 5 I saw yesterday of people who were in the Madoff business and then owed 30 million, 40 million left to their own devices, and a bunch of them are sitting 10 years in New York in jail. So it's rabid. If you have that personality and you don't yourself take precautions, set up structures, tell people, remember you're only as sick as your secrets, you'll wind up in where Madoff is, which is he has to ask if he can urinate to some guard. Doesn't limit yourself to wealth or prosperity, or everybody's involved here if you're an addict.
I want to transition to another area of Gamblers Anonymous and about helping people who are connected to problem gamblers, and that is Gam-Anon. And your wife, my mom, is one of the leaders in helping families, especially the partners, in many cases when it's a man, not always, the wife, deal with the shock and the ramifications and the stakes of having a partner who is a problem gambler. Can you talk on that perspective, from the perspective of the family or the partner, and what that means and what they could potentially do as a next step to gain help?
Yeah. When I went to my first meeting 4.5 decades ago, my wife attended not my meeting, but the Gam-Anon room, which you just talked about. Many of your viewers here have heard of Al-Anon, which is the same as Gam-Anon, only Al-Anon deals with husbands, spouses, sisters, brothers of alcoholics. Gam-Anon was created by someone who was in Al-Anon, but then the husband was duly addicted, and alcohol was no longer a problem, gambling was. So it is a wonderful resort because, especially in gambling, people don't think there is an Al-Anon existing. And yes, my wife has been a forerunner of Gam-Anon. And after the initial shock when people come in and they don't know the world has been crushed, the world that they thought was in it was lovely and their futures, they deal with that. That's grief of endless bounds. And my wife, I see her on the phone. She's a Mother Teresa with these people. But then the key is not dealing with people on the initial shock, but if they decide, let's say it's a marriage, if they decide to stay in the marriage, what can they do to protect their husband and themselves? For instance, money. If you're living in a house, put it in your name. In a lot of places now, if you live with someone, they're still entitled to 50%, even if it's in the wife's name. Then they have to sign an agreement that the remaining 50% of the house is not mine. It's my kid, it's my wife, whatever. Then the eternal word, enabling. The addict in recovery comes and says, I need $50,000 to start a new business. Answer is no. Maybe 3 years from now, maybe it's a yes, but now go get a job pumping gas for now. Just find yourself, find who you are. You see, abstinence, stopping from an addiction, is not recovery. It's the start of recovery. Are you still a compulsive liar? Are you still keeping secrets? Yeah, but I'm not gambling. So what? You will be. And stopping gambling is just another phase of recovery. And you're not. I was at a meeting 2 days ago, a kid that I love, and I'm chairing the meeting. And I said, what are you most proud of last 2 weeks? And this kid, well, I don't know that well. I see him at meetings. It's a funny guy. He says, can I reverse that? And I said, sure. And he says, this is what I'm not proud of. I've been in this program 5 years. I haven't made a bet, and I'm still the idiot I was when I walked in. So I say that to show you stopping is not necessary recovery. Recovery cannot happen until you stop. But then you got to do the work. You got to work as hard at your recovery as you did at your addiction. So somebody's dealing with this, has a problem, they can go online today and they can find 100 meetings in North America and in Ontario we are, and attend it online. So there's no excuse if you live in a little town in Minnesota that you can't be in a meeting in Florida tonight, Gam-Anon or GA.
Mm-hmm. Dad, why do you do this type of work?
I do this kind of work because I'm a big follower, although I don't drink, of AA. And the creator of Bill Wilson, who we all owe a debt of gratitude because he was #1 in 12-step program. At one time, through mail and stuff, it was estimated Wilson had 2 million people who were trying to get in touch with him in any day. He was offered everything. CEO, government. He stayed making a fraction of money he could have made as a director of Alcoholics Recovery or something. On his tombstone, you talk about minimalist. On his tombstone, it says, Bill Wilson, 19 whatever, pass it on. And I've embedded that in my head. If I was fortunate enough with wonderful family, overcoming some of the health challenges I've had, then I have to teach in my gambling addiction world that your cup can be half empty or half full. I chose half full. Everybody can make the same choice because you really don't have a choice if you want to lead some kind of normal life. When I walked in, there was a mentor. I became my mentor, a guy named Harvey, and very hardworking, lovely man. His smile was recovery. And he used to start every meeting by saying, I've lost money, I've lost time, and I've lost a sense of values. I got back my sense of values in here. I got back most of my money, but I can never get back my time. And I want to strangle new kids that come in here at 30 and 28. They got their whole life. Somebody comes in at 60, it's lovely that they stopped and they can, in their golden years, they say, can have a normal life, but you can't get back the time. And that's why I still go every week for 45 years, unless I'm away or I'm ill.
1 year from now, if you and I are celebrating your work and how it's evolved and grown beyond what you could have imagined was possible, what's one thing we're celebrating when it comes to your work in intervening on behalf of problem gamblers, the work you do with Gamblers Anonymous, and any projects that you have that you're interested in this area?
If the knowledge that I can bring or you can bring on these kind of podcasts saves one male or female, then the work that I do and a lot of others around me, it will have been worth it. So knowledge to me is the key. Education to me is the key. I don't ever want to hear a person say I didn't know what to do or I didn't know I had a problem and then it's too late. It's never too late. When they tell you you have terminal cancer, it's late, but not this. This is a mental disorder. And by the way, I would add that the GA rooms and the statistics indicate that women are like at 25, 30%. When I got involved in all that, they were at 2. And women don't gamble always the same as what men addicts do. Women gamble for escape, period. Bad jobs, bad family, bad marriages, no money. They just want to break even at the casino. They don't play sports, by the way, or by and large horse racing, although they do more than casino. They just want to break even so they can go back the next day and escape some more. Males tend to want to break the bank. Vacations around the world, best cars, Maseratis. Women aren't interested in that. Women just want to get away from it all. Men want to get away from it all, but want to break the bank while they're getting it away.
Is that where, when I read one of the articles you sent, it spoke about emotional escapism that was especially prevalent during COVID and with remote workers, where they said now more than ever, because people are working from home, which was set off in turbo gear, in hyper turbo gear because of the pandemic, that problem gambling within, like you said, within the front of their phone or in front of their computer has exploded because of that emotional escapism from the loneliness and the boredom of being in their home for long periods of time. Can you expand on that a little?
Absolutely, I agree with you. I don't even need a survey. The Gamblers Anonymous rooms around the world have gone up 100%. If we would go up in a year 10%, we're like meetings that have 6, 7 people normally, somebody new coming in, somebody coming back whose life is still in ruination. But now those 6 and 7 people meetings are 28, 26, and no particular culture. Every culture. It's the United Nations now, these meetings. So and it has to be post-COVID. You can't, accessibility is easier, obviously. But even when you could go on your computer and bet it on a site in Poland, which you would think was an American site, the numbers went up, but not dramatically in the last couple of years. So it has to be COVID related. Those studies are just being taken now. But as I said, when I speak to Gamblers Anonymous meetings or go to their conventions, used to be 100 people. Now there's 400. So the numbers speak for themselves. And that's my fear if businesses don't take when banks are, but banks are hurting. If you can say that in terms of their numbers, their bad loans have taken over. Now I'm saying all bad loans are people with addiction, but it has a way of creeping into all financial places, including businesses.
Yeah. And there's something I want to touch on that we spoke a little earlier before we wrap up shortly, because I think you were being a bit humble. From what I know, you have literally talked people off of buildings, off of ledges, who were about to take their own lives or were contemplating that, were desperate and had no place to go, were successful in their professional lives, but like you alluded to, were leading double lives in that what their signs were not easily detectable, even by the ones who love them. Can you talk about an example of where you've previously helped someone thrive and manage, if not completely eradicate, their addiction and what the results were?
Well, first of all, on a general note, I can't be there all the time 24/7 when somebody is going crazy or insane. So I told people years ago, and I'm actually touched that everywhere I go, people tell me this little thing. I told people, take a picture of everybody you love, whether it's your wife, your kids, your grandmother, a friend, and put it in your wallet. And only do me one service. If you ever get to a point that you can't reach anybody, take the picture of it. And I can tell you that has saved lives. I know that because people come up I've never met and hug me and want to kiss me and said I saved their life. And I said, really? Why? How? When? And they tell me the picture in the wallet. It's another thing I tell people, and I'll get to your question about somebody, is a lot of people, addicts or recovering addicts, put a piece of paper in their washroom. Usually it says, I will not smoke up today. I will not drink today. I will not gamble today. I don't do that. I put up a sign that says, I will be honest today. If I am honest today, I will not gamble. See, one of the myths, you asked for myths, I should have thought of it, and people think I'm crazy, but gambling addiction, drug addiction, drinking addiction is not your problem. How can you say that? Living is your problem. If you look at your character defects and try to correct them at your pace, and again, we're going to talk about honesty being one, but narcissistic and everything else, you try to eliminate it as best you can or work on it, you won't do your addiction. You'll have to, because that, if anything, will give you some focus. Now, as far as the story, my favorite story, my wife and this person will be my legacy to addiction field. 18, 19 years ago, I ran a meeting at a convalescent home. So run by nuns, finest people ever to work with. Your handshake with them was everything. Never charge us a cent, although we used to give them money from collections that we make every week at Christmas and stuff. And in there are convalescent home people from every walks of life who terrible car accidents, terrible this, terrible that. And the odd time people would come in their wheelchair because we give coffee and cookies to our members at the break. And they would think this is a special event at the convalescent home. Anyway, some guy comes in with a wheelchair. And I said, sir, can you just come back like at 10 minutes for the break and I'll give some coffee and cookies? And he looked at me and says, oh, I thought this was a Gamblers Anonymous room. I need help. So I looked like egg on my face. Oh, sure, come in. So he wheels in, and I noticed he lost a leg, and he's now been a member for 19 years. He's the young me in terms of helping people and everything. When he talks and said, I have so much gratitude, and I'm looking at a guy in a wheelchair with one leg, and I said, he's got gratitude. Like, this is should be the most non-gratitude. And he asked me after a week or two to sponsor him. And as I told you earlier, he'll be my legacy here. He doesn't know he lost a leg, and he still has so many problems with limbs and all this stuff. He is happy, positive couple, not half full. Calls me once a week for 19 years and more. And his story, brain fog, leaving a casino had lost for the 50th time all his money, doesn't even remember it, but he wound up walking across the 401 at night and is hit by two trucks. His chances of living at Baycrest after that incident was at half of 1%. He's actually lucky. Nothing happened in his brain. One leg it cost him. And he's so grateful for that. And you say to yourself, well, whether you're agnostic or not, some spiritual person must have been there. And he's got to carry on this work. He got back to his job, which is a senior job where he was, where they told him he'd never work again. He's done everything and more. His kids have come back into his life. He phones me, doesn't phone me on gambling stuff. That stopped many years ago. He phones me, what should he do with a kid that is giving him hell? I said, where is he staying? In my house. Okay, don't take the hell. Tell him these are the rules of the house. Probably give you $20 towards, I don't want you on the street, towards a hotel. And that's all we talk about. And that's the way it should be in a perfect addiction recovery world.
What a story. Wow. And beautifully told. Dad, if you had a magic wand, how would the challenge of problem gambling or gambling addiction look from a 30,000-foot view of what your vision would be to help this epidemic become much more manageable and move in the opposite direction it is?
Well, the first thing is selfish. In Ontario, where I live, they're making billions of dollars, whether privately or the government. And we have one place for recovery. 8 beds, which the government does, and that's nice because it's but a rehab center with 1 bed in a hospital. In my perfect world, every community. And it doesn't have to be just gambling. It's got to be free. And this place in Windsor, Ontario is free. So I'll give the government congrats on that one. Only one, I think, in North America that's free, 3 weeks. But it's not enough. The government is trying to a certain extent. They don't want to lose this income they're getting. A long way to go. In my perfect world, well, there's a dream world and an actual world. I want to see I don't think this revenue stream, the gambling revenue, is going to leave. In a perfect world, you'd like it to, and you'd like everybody to be a non-addict, but being realistic. But I want to see help. I want to see centers. I want to see jobs created. One of the worst things is they lose everything. They're doing the best they can. They got nowhere to work. So I want to see places where these people can work. I'm a big fan of immigrants. My wife used to be running immigrant services at the school board, and they get them jobs. Why not gambling addicts who have paid taxes up to a certain point? Get them jobs, even menial, so they find themselves utilizing the gifts they were given. So that would be a perfect world situation. I'd like to, anybody who works on or gambles excessively online, you can sign yourself out. There's new digital stuff. I'm just reading some guy in England, and you can hook it in like you can an app. And I'd like somewhere, like you sign yourself out of a casino, or they sign you out if you're going crazy. I'd like that now in the new world of technology, where one of these houses knows that this person cannot afford it and uses this technology to stop them from going in and betting. So we got a lot of work here. A lot of work has been started, but we're going to need a generation of trying to get through to people. And knowledge is the best. Got to educate, educate, educate.
Yeah, and you do that so brilliantly. The final 2-part question that I'll also respond to as well is, in our time together, which is coming up upon the hour, what did you appreciate about this conversation? And what do you hope the listener will take away from this?
Well, whenever I do this, and certainly this one today, it's education. It's to people who are watching. If I had time, I'd do 1,000 types of things, but this reaches big amount, small amount, who knows what amount, but you only have to reach one, as far as I'm concerned, for them to understand it. And understand that this is, as I said an hour ago, a tsunami with, and it's money. And that's a lethal combination. So that's what I see from doing something like this, going public on the seriousness of addiction generally, but more specific, the gambling addiction, which seems still in an area of fun. Alcohol is in the area of fun until you drink so much and you're drunk, and then you could kill me on the road. Gambling is reaching, we have people who run off on a car, go 100 miles an hour on their way to a cliff and kill two people on the way. So don't dismiss it. Do something about it. What was the second part?
Just what did you appreciate about this interaction and sharing this?
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love the work you do, educating people in all sorts of areas. And I love it because it gets me a step closer to informing people and preparing people for the future.
What I appreciated is you talked about the power of having loved ones in your wallet. I have a picture the first time ever of a guest on the wall over there on my values board. So being able to talk to you about this in a different context than we usually would chat about, which would be a combination of personal and what I'm up to. And you're always my biggest fan and so supportive. To hear stories that I haven't quite heard before and about pulling all of this valuable, relevant, useful, and without hyperbole, life-saving information for people who I know, who I might be loosely connected with or closely connected with through the various platforms that I will make sure that this particular podcast gets out to, is I'm grateful for that, and grateful that we have this document, this living, breathing document that will last beyond the conversation that we had, that I can share with your grandkids, my kids, with my wife, with my friends, and people who I might come across who have a gambling addiction. What I hope that the listener, and I say the listener because I'm speaking with you, I'm not speaking to the masses, I'm speaking to you who might be listening to this. My father is the most valuable resource, human resource that I know of in my studies. And this would be widely verified if you look up what he's done. He is an addict himself, and he's bravely gone right through hell and come out stronger the other side. And he helps people every single day who have addictions. And when I say he's talked people off ledges, he's done that so many times that we would have to have a full week of podcasts to name them all. So I am shamelessly plugging my father as a gambling interventionist because he can help you. If you have a gambling addiction, he can help your family members, and he can help people who work for you or who you work with, who you're concerned about, both personally and professionally. So I'm going to tell you how to reach out to my dad if you have this issue or you suspect it even a little bit. You can reach out to me and private message me. I'm easy to find at Jamie Mason Cohen. You can reach out directly to my dad. And in the show notes, I'm going to put a link and a phone number where you can reach out directly to my father. And I hope that if you're listening, and you were listening for a reason, because everything happens for a reason, you take advantage of the synchronicity of being here today with us, and you do something about it, like my father, Howard Cohen, said. On that note, Dad, thank you for being a guest. It's been an honor. It's been a privilege, and I'm lucky to have you as a father, and I'm moved by the work you do. This is Signature Leadership, helping world-class leaders uncover their authentic selves so that you can uncover your authentic self. Thanks.